fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KC 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Dave Martino is here.
I am. Here I am.
Here. You're there.
I'm here. I'm there.
You are there, here,
Present.
Everywhere. Another great summer day.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Especially up your way.
Yeah, well, it's always hot wherever I am, it's hot.
That's right.
It's hot, sunny, beautiful. People just love it. They're always in a good mood around me.
Absolutely, Al.
What are you laughing at?
What?
I am the epitome of cheer.
You are.
So now, Citadel. So you didn't watch Citadel. What's your latest movie? How come you haven't been doing any movie reviews? What's going on? I see something about Speakman, but Speakman is 1990s. What's going on?
That's 1991. Yeah, that's a great film. That's coming. That's going to Blu-ray again as a 4K transfer.
Have they got nothing better to do than 1991 Speakman movie?
That's a great film. What was that again? I lost the name.
Well, anytime I've seen any of his films, it's the same.
Yeah, his first movie is great. Perfect Weapon. There it is.
Great.
It's a great martial art film.
Awesome.
One of the best.
See a little Boston accent talking. Martial art.
What did I say?
You always do. You turn into Boston when you go martial.
Oh, no.
My name is John Kennedy, and this is Martial.
Car. Park the car in Harvard Yard.
Well, so you
Marshall.
No movie reviews. You're slacking on your job.
I know.
You know, what are you doing other than going around partying all the time and going to concerts? You know, whose concert you going to now? I see you got another thing going on.
Well, it won't be until August. That's Lita Ford.
Lita Ford. Wow.
Yeah.
But you get to meet her and go in the back room. So I guess she got you pushing her wheelchair around? Is that, are you wheelchair?
Oh, you're gonna get emails for that one.
Well, at this point, I think I'm an ageist. I'm as old as Lita Ford, so I can say this.
Yes.
You know, so you're going to be pushing her wheelchair out? So
she's still rocking and rolling. Come on.
Oh, yeah, the pictures make you look that way or her that way, but come on. It's like they say that about me, but then you have to wheel me out into the stage. Come on.
It's going to be great. She's going to be at the Cabot, Beverly, Massachusetts. I'm trying to get rid of my Boston accent.
No, you want to have the mop. You want to be like Boston boy.
Boston.
She might find that rather attractive.
Yeah. Well, I'm going with my wife, so, it's not going to.
Oh, that's all right. She couldn't hear at her age. Come on. All that loud music all this time.
Yeah.
She hasn't got a new album, says she? She's not. There's no new product coming out. She's just kind of.
No, not since the last couple of years. She had an album a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. Was there any hits?
Yeah. I don't know if there were any hits. A lot of these, the album's good. It's a good album.
Was it called Heavy Metal Floss or something?
I forget what it's called. I don't know if it's Living Like a Runaway or Relentless or
Living with Your Hair in a Bun at 65.
61, right? You got to make it rhyme.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Jeez, big comeback tour. Well, Joe Jett's still touring, but then she never really stopped.
No.
Seems like she's always been around, so,
Yeah, Lita Ford's been around for a bit. I mean, I think she was married to Jim Gillette, and they left the country for a while after 2001, and then they returned and stuff. And she's been on tour, I think, for the last few years.
Is it at casinos?
It's everywhere. Yeah. Well, this is going to be at I think the Cabot, which is like a little theater.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
good for her. She's making money and doing what she did for 30, 40 years, and
Yeah.
she didn't have to go to work at like the Blockbuster or McDonald's or anything.
Yeah, like me, right?
Yeah. Supersize.
Supersize it.
Well, speaking of Blockbuster, we've got an author on today that, now he is writing, we call it young adult steampunk fantasy book. So let's find out what that is. Let's help this old guy here. So now the new book is called Hunted by Fire, and it's Mr. Jim Hepburn. So thank you for being here, Jim.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Al. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
Well, Jim, now let's find out this. Now, help this old guy here. It's like steampunk.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for someone that's like Lita Ford's age?
Well, it kind of means, it's a fantasy world with elements of technology and of steam power. So, typical fantasy might have, sword and board, horse and ride kind of gig, but steampunk could have a lot more things. It could have steam engines in it. It could have airships. It could have all sorts of stuff. So it kind of opens up another avenue in a lot of ways.
But what does that mean? So like, what timing is this? What time does this happen in? So your book takes place in what year?
It's a fantasy world, so it would be in a medieval-esque style of world there. You could probably think of it probably something around the 1400s, maybe, if somebody had maybe figured out how to build a steam engine a little bit ahead of time. So a little bit of a combination of elements there that kind of go into making it.
So, and steampunk itself is just kind of you're throwing in steam-powered industrial world kind of into your medieval time.
Yeah, little touches of it here and there. In Hunted by Fire specifically, it's mostly just a medieval world there. It's just it's on the cusp. It's kind of coming up. It's dawning on the world, I guess, the technology in a lot of ways. So it's used to kind of open up a lot of possibilities for the characters and for the story, and yeah, something other than just your typical, using magic, sort of fighting sword, tooth and nail, sort of story.
Everyday stuff. Yeah. Like,
yeah. Depending on what you do, but yeah, of course. Yeah. Lots of worlds you could jump in there.
Well, so now, how does someone like you develop this? So what are you creating this fantasy world first and then putting characters into it? Or are you creating characters and decide, well, I'm going to put them into a world that I'm going to make? Like, where does this start?
Yeah, so it's definitely a little bit more of the second. Tolkien did the first, built the whole world, made lore for it and history and the whole thing, and then decided the story that was going to unfold that he wanted to focus his writing on. I was kind of doing it the other way, similar to how George R.R. Martin had done it a little bit, where you start with a concept and some characters and the sort of story you want to tell, and then you build the world around them and spread it out as they go in a way that still feels real and immersive.
So Tolkien, is this someone I should pick up and read?
That would be J.R.R., yes. Might have seen a movie or two, you never know. And they're from back in 2004, so there might not be as much of an excuse. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll look on Amazon and see if I can find this Tolkien.
It's about a ring. I'll give you a hint.
Ring.
Yeah.
So, in creating a world, what's the rules? What are your rules when you create a fantasy world?
Well, it's all gotta make sense. It's all got to, there's gotta be some kind of structure that a reader can delve into and latch on to have some kind of understanding of what could or could not happen in the story. And so as long as you're faithful to that, you can do anything that you can imagine within those kind of bound sets.
But you're creating magic too, right? So when you have fantasy magic sort of rules, whose rules do you follow? Like, I'm just trying to figure this out because I want to write a book like this. And so how do I do that?
Well, actually, for the magic part, I avoided that a little bit. In my world, in Hunted by Fire, magic is kind of ritualistic and it's distant and it's not something. If somebody ran into that, it would be they would have a reaction similar to how we would react to that probably nowadays. Maybe how people would have reacted back in the 1400s, kind of, with fear and misunderstanding. So it's not commonplace by any means. So unfortunately, I can't help you there because I totally avoided that myself.
Well, do you build, your magical system? Do you build it off of historical sources, or is this just your imagination? Do you do you sit down and create and kind of craft the system that you use within the novel?
It would be very much the second one, where you would sit down and craft it and figure out how it works, what are the rules, what are the limitations, what's possible for somebody to achieve in this, and does that make sense, and is that entertaining, and does that kind of flow? But specifically, though, in Hunted by Fire, magic is much more used almost as an unknown threat in a lot of ways. It's something that the characters don't have a means to understand quite yet. They're not. They're interacting with it maybe in ways they don't, in kind of mysterious ways, on the fringes of what's happening to them and in the events of the story. But it's by no means a main theme or a main tool that they use.
So now this is based. Your main character is a 15-year-old, and his name's Felix. So how did you develop that character? Where did he come from?
Yeah. So a lot of I think maybe a lot of authors probably do this to some extent. But Felix was developed a little bit from me when I was 15, and then I took aspects of other folks that I knew that had displayed maybe some characteristics that I really liked, or that I knew could make up a really good and memorable character, and I kind of imbued them into him. And so when Felix talks, or when I write from Felix's perspective, there's a lot of I guess there's a lot of that kind of goes into it, and a lot of those personality traits that I kind of pick up, but helping, I think, kind of having it from my own perspective there first really kind of helps, I think, kind of set a good, realistic character when a reader's writing it, so he sounds believable, and he can immerse them in the same way, because what he sees and what he feels is relatable in a lot of ways. So it kind of started with me, so in a lot of ways, but like I said, kind of pulling and mixing different traits from different folks that I know, and different people that you experience in life.
Well, I was surprised to learn that like 20 to 50% of people have no internal dialogue in their minds. Right, you've probably heard this. And do you have an internal monologue? Can you hear your characters? Is that how you create dialogue, or is it some other way?
No, you know what? I would say I'm definitely part of that 20 to 50% where I don't have an internal monologue of any kind. I'm not sure how that works, really. It'd be interesting to know a little bit more about that. But what goes through my head, if it's not dialogue, what goes through, maybe it's just pictures. Who knows? But no, you know what? I think I like to speak out loud a little bit sometimes as you write, and it helps, I think, a lot of ways. Like, would somebody actually say so-and-so? Well, if you say it out loud, you can kind of get a good gist. And would that person say that if they were 15? Would they say that in this kind of situation? Would they say that with the type of personality that they have? And you can kind of tweak and alter it based on that. But that's what editing's for too. So editing helps.
Now, the timing. So when you do a different timing, like you said, this is maybe 1400 or somewhere, you leave it kind of open, but do you kind of focus, or do you worry about the language, the slang, and the behaviors of your people, or do they fit the time of 1400, or do they fit today? Like, how do you do that?
Yes, very much so. That's actually, that occurs all the time when I'm doing something, when I'm writing something about what they're going to say, because I find it's so easy to make a slip and say something that refers to, let's say, like modern day slang, or that a technology that maybe exists now, but doesn't exist back then. Like, for example, the other day I had a character who was thinking about something, and he didn't understand something that another character told him. So he said, I actually physically wrote out, it didn't compute. And then I sat there and I said, well, that doesn't make any kind of sense at all, because that doesn't fit that wouldn't fit the time nor place, nor, would anybody have any idea of what a computer is? So it kind of slips in there, but you do your best to I think take it out while still trying to be relevant to the language that of the current day.
Do you kind of go back and study that time period, or do you kind of look at old papers or something like that? Like, how do you go listen to old Lita Ford tapes? Like, what to get back to the 1400s? What do you?
Yeah, go to the local library. No, it's the language. I think it was really important because it's for young adults, right? It's for teenagers in a lot of ways, and so I didn't want too much of the language to be unreadable or unrelatable in a lot of ways. So I wanted the language that the characters had, and the way that they spoke to be modern enough for them to understand, but just to overtly, or just to miss, I should say, any kind of major technological references or anything like that, to keep the story going and to keep things from kind of tripping up, I guess, right? So I don't know if a young person, if you ever, I think back to in high school when I had to read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is 1800s era, and such different language. It's so different, and I don't know if that would go over very well to the young person picking up a book, going to Chapters, picking up the book or something, hoping that it's going to be their next great find, and then they open it up and it's all older English. So I definitely wanted to avoid that in every way. So keeping the language as modern as possible is a good way to kind of, I think, avoid that.
What type of restrictions are placed on young adult stories as opposed to stories that are exclusively written for adults?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of things I think you probably would think of and imagine, right? Like, I think sexual, overt, any kind of lots of drug use or a lot of the more adult themes of gore and things like that. A lot of the darker things you kind of have to avoid, but there's kind of a challenge in that, I think, in a lot of ways too, because kids nowadays, they're so exposed to everything, right? And it takes a lot to surprise them or make them feel a certain way without having it overtly adult. And that's a line that's really hard to tread.
You're not writing a lot of sex and violence in it?
Oh no. Oh no. I'm trying to, I want parents to buy the book and be happy they bought the book for their kid. But, no, I thought, Harry Potter did that really well, kind of closer towards the end there. Harry Potter, of course, does a lot of things very well, but, towards the end of the books of Harry Potter, there's a couple of instances where it just very elegantly touches on the possibility of something darker with one of the villains and Hermione, one of the main characters there. But she did an excellent job of touching on it and then just totally skating by it. And so that was something that I always wanted to emulate if it was ever, whenever those kind of themes might ever pop up. Not that they pop up ever, or very often, but, it's hard sometimes, I think, to kind of to walk that line of being completely PG, I guess, in a lot of ways, but still being faithful to what could be happening out there in a way that could engage a teenager nowadays with all they're exposed to.
The way I understand it is it's book one, so you're planning a series of books on this. How do you do that originally? Do you have this kind of mapped out of how many books you want to do and how many themes and things you want your characters to go through, or is it something that happens just as you go?
Yeah, no. So definitely, there is definitely an overarching plan for sure. So you, at least in my case, and I know, of course, everybody has their own little way of doing of things like this, and it's so interesting to hear those. For me, I had wanted to start my characters in a place where they were the most adaptable and the most changeable. I guess the most malleable, really, is the better way to say it. Where they're younger and there's lots of things that could happen to them and they don't really know exactly where their lives are going to head yet or how they're going to have to adapt and change to suit their surroundings and what will happen to them. But in terms of where you kind of want to aim this kind of series and what kind of story you want to tell, I had some scenes in my head that I always really imagined, that I always dreamed of writing one day, that kind of building up towards big, epic, kind of grandiose scenes, emotional scenes, something that things that really kind of tugged on me, or that I would imagine would tug on me as a young person or as a reader, that I really wanted to have other people experience. So, but a lot of those scenes, and so you kind of, I think, build towards those scenes a little bit every time. There's probably a couple throughout each book that you want to put in there, and because you're trying to tell these emotional scenes and these things that will really impact people. So in terms of the direction, I would kind of think it's where those scenes kind of lead you, and what kind of characters have to be in those scenes to make them real and emotional. And that would be where the stories would lead to and from, I guess.
I'm wondering how you keep track of everything in your series novels. Do you have a system that you use? Did you create a series Bible? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think a series Bible is maybe the way that people would refer to it as. What I started doing originally was I found it difficult when I was editing chapters early on and trying to kind of tie in the bigger story. I found I would lose little things that I wanted to hook in later on to add richness to the story. So I ended up with every chapter, I would have a separate document. I would jot down things that had happened and whatever maybe a character might have referred to a country far off in the world, or maybe they would have referred to some kind of technology or some kind of political event or a relationship or anything like that. So I kind of just started to collect all these chapter notes as I wrote all these chapters. And so then, to your point, I had to kind of conglomerate them. So then I spent some time after the first book was done collecting it all on a big Bible, I guess, a document that I have, and I do that now still with any kind of book with the book that I'm doing now, the second one, I do that every chapter and just kind of take these little notes and make sure that they don't crisscross and kind of reread them every now and then and keep it all fresh in the mind to make sure I'm following all the rules, as it were.
Is each book going to stand on their own, or are people going to have to read this from book one on?
No, it's definitely a series that they would have to read from book one on to really get the full breadth of the character. So that's kind of the vision right now. Maybe doing a series of maybe 5 or 6 or 7, just kind of keep going and have something that not only tells a really epic and awesome story that somebody could be really excited to pick up one day and go, oh, there's not only one book, there's 7. That's awesome. And they can delve into that for a really long time. That's something that I always wanted to.
With each book, and now you've got book 1 here, is there a subtext or a theme or some sort of thing you want people to get out of the book besides the entertainment value of a fantasy?
Yeah. There is a slight theme there for sure that I would hope some people would pick up, and it's related to high school and STEM subjects that people experience. I find that, I guess, out there in the world, like a lot of books and media are focused on young men or young people, really have characters who always get really good at physical combat. That's fun. It's exciting, and people are drawn to that, me included, right? It's always great to have that kind of conflict to read. But Hunted by Fire, I think, makes a slight distinction. It has a lot of that in it too, but it makes a slight distinction because real life, I don't think, is always like that. When you're a kid growing up, many, if not all, the biggest battles you'll face, they can't be solved physically. They can only be solved mentally with like things like discipline and cooperation and logic and force of will and assertiveness and whatnot. So it was important to have a main character for a young adult fantasy book that a teenager could really root for, but who is really well armed to solve all their problems with their mind in a lot of ways. And then that's related, I think, too, to going back to the whole STEM thing, because in high school, a lot of kids are trying to figure out who they are, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life. Everybody always asks them, right? It's like the number one question you ask of somebody who's between the ages of 16 and 22. What are you going to do? Like, what's the next thing you're going to do? Like, what do you think you're drawn to? And I think there's this kind of big dichotomy of either being an arts kid or a science kid, and that's how it was pitched to me, or that's how I understood it when I was that age. You're trying to figure out what you're good at, and sometimes you might categorize yourself as an arts kid or a science kid if you maybe get a bad grade at something, or if you struggle with a teacher that you don't relate to, or sometimes a parent can kind of categorize a child like that too. It all depends, but either way it happens. I find obviously that most are avoidant of the maths and the sciences and the engineering and the statistics, and it's too bad, I think, in a lot of ways, because there's so much that you can do in the world that relates to that. You can do lots with both, but for somebody who reads Hunted by Fire, and who experiences the challenges that Felix has as a character, I'd really hope that even if they're really drawn later in life to something artsy or something with communications, like all those really important things too, I'd hope that they would maybe be encouraged or excited to just try again to kind of grasp at maths and sciences before they kind of write it off right away when they're 16 and rule it as not for them.
Yeah. Like, I want it to be a DJ.
Spinning tracks, yeah. You could still do that. I'm sure you could pick that up and have a go at that. I think it'd be a good time.
No.
No.
I'm too good of a dancer, so I'm going to keep on dancing. Taking over for Ellen.
Dancing that away.
Yeah, taking over for the Ellen show. So, where does this start for someone like you? How did you, I mean, when you were back in high school, is this something you always saw, that you're going to be this writer and you're going to be writing books like this and fantasies, or was it kind of something that came along later?
Yeah, no, I never really envisioned myself writing a book, not until I was older. But when I was in high school, I was an avid consumer of all things. I was seeking out books, anything that, you go through all the great ones so fast, you devour those in a day, and you seek something else to kind of either get you by, or find a role model in, or something that is a little bit of escapism when you're kind of going through the grind of high school, or of growing up, really, in a lot of ways. So when I went to university, in Canadian university, I did an arts program, and I read so much as an assignment, and not really so much for fun, that I kind of actually got out of writing. And then it wasn't really until I was kind of in my mid-20s, that I picked it up again, because I suddenly felt this need I really wanted to write the book that I would have loved as a kid, because sometimes it's really hard to find good books as a kid, especially as a young male. Not to say anything about the young females out there, but there's lots of young adult fantasy for young females, and lots of stuff they love and are really passionate about. And I think it's a little bit harder to find a good book as a young man, or as a parent of a young man, in a lot of ways. So I wanted to write something that I would have really resonated with, and something that I think they would really resonate with as well when they read it.
Yeah, I mean, so was there something that actually encouraged you to actually try and write a book and see if you could get it published, or was there someone or something, or how did that come about?
Yeah, actually, you're right. So there was a couple little moments along the way. So in high school, I of course naturally gravitated. I felt like the thing I was naturally good at was English. I was always good at writing and reading, and I excelled in English very well. And there's a couple assignments that were given to us, one in grade 10 and one in grade 12, where you were given your own story to write up. You could make your own fantasy story, or it could be about whatever you wanted. The world was your oyster. It just had to be eloquent, and you had to write it out, and it had to be several pages long. I found that when I started those assignments, I really latched onto them, and they became little passion projects of mine. And so specifically the one in grade 12, there was a girl in high school who, and she was the most popular girl in school, classic story like that. She was a friend, but she didn't really relate at all to English. She wasn't interested in school. She was interested in partying and in being cool and whatnot. And so we were in the same English class. And so I had written this passion project of cat people, and this fantasy world of cat people, and this revenge story that was going on. And it was fresh and melodramatic, but it was fun for me to do. And so I remember on the day we handed it all to the teacher, and then the teacher, unbeknownst to us all, stood up and said, "Okay, well, great. Now you're all going to read each other's and edit them." And that was mortifying because I had no idea that anybody else was going to read this kind of nerdy passion project that I had. And lo and behold, and I should have known this ahead of time that something like this would happen, but lo and behold, my story went right to this girl's desk. And, so she, opened it up and was reading it. And I had one in front of me. So I read mine really quickly, sweating the whole time, wondering what she was going to say. And, I was prepared for all sorts of kind of responses that maybe were discouraging or something that would be, something terrifying, I guess. But, to my surprise, I remember she slammed the paper back on the desk. She stood up and she said, "This is the best thing I've ever read in my life," and then marched over to my desk and threw it down on my desk. And I was blown away. It was such one of those memorable moments that you have from your youth. I was stunned. And I vaguely remember the teacher kind of shouting and saying something to this girl at the time. But it meant a lot to me that something that I had written or something that I had done or created had such an effect on somebody like that. I didn't think it would ever be possible.
Well, at least you didn't make her go jump out the window or something.
Yeah, that's right. That would have been the opposite reaction. That would have been horrible, of course, but not fun at all. But so I guess basically fast forwarding back to when I was 25 and I kind of sat by my computer one day and typed out a few words that moment reminded me that it might be possible. It might be something that you could do to kind of have that same effect, but on young people as a whole in a way that I kind of wanted to have for myself at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and well, in today's world too, with social media and so much easy access to someone like yourself, when you're putting out a book, like people can just say and do anything they want. How do you regulate that, or do you pay attention to reviews or what people are saying or doing about you, or do you kind of stay away from that?
No, I keep a thumb on it a little bit. It's in terms of reviews, they've been decent so far. Nobody's been too mean. But I value the feedback most from people who I know they're either right in that age range that I'm trying to hit. Like if they're 12 to 18, young man, young woman sort of idea. Like those ones mean a little bit more to me. I love reading those ones a little bit extra carefully, to try and absorb everything that I can. And then of course people who have no stake in it at all. So people who assess the book and what it's worth and what it's saying and its entertainment value from a point that's a bit outside the realm of being just a simple consumer in a way. So I guess yes, I definitely keep a bit of a thumb on it, though the feedback that you would get from stuff like that wouldn't deviate from the scenes that you eventually want to write. It would more so just, I think, affect how you write them, and hopefully all for the better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course. Do you think writing this first book and getting it out, how do you think it's changed you as a writer?
I think it kind of just started the writing journey in a lot of ways. I wondered when I wrote it at the time, because it was so new and such a task to undertake. I wondered once I had done it and put it out there, if I was just going to be kind of done. Like how sometimes you accomplish a goal and then you move on. But I really learned that even though I put it out there, I was still so hungry to keep telling the story and to really elicit emotions from the folks that read it, that I kind of realized that it's going to be something that's part of me for a long time coming, and that's not something I typically expected. I wasn't sure when, or I wasn't sure how that would work in a lot of ways, but that was the biggest surprise on my end.
So what's next for you now? The book's out now, and you're doing a little touring or a little work promoting it. You're working on book 2, you said? Yeah,
working on book 2. I'm about 70% done. So life rolls on in that way, right? Just writing the second one, getting it done, finished, polished, sending that out there, writing the third one, and kind of continuing on this journey that's been starting, and to hopefully make this, like I said, this series that is that tells a grand and exciting story. Well, do you see yourself ever changing the type of writing you're doing from fantasy to something different? I don't know. You know what? Actually, I've maybe pictured myself maybe down the road altering from young adults to adult writing, but no, I don't think I've ever actually considered not writing in fantasy, and I think that's mostly just because fantasy was what I always loved to read. I wasn't really too interested in other stuff. Sometimes the odd thing would pop up, but fantasy was the bread and butter for me that excited me for most of my life, and still does. So I don't think I think staying in that realm would just be the most fun in a lot of ways. So how do people find you? How do people find Jim? You on social media? You're on website? Whereabouts do people come and find you? Yeah, I am on social media, though I don't claim to be the master at it. That maybe people say I should be, but I'm on Instagram. Instagram's probably the most active one for me, at author Jim Hepburn. I'm on Facebook as author Jim Hepburn also, and then you can also find my website, www.authorjimhepburn.ca. Perfect. Of course, we'll have that up for people to find it, so they can find you with one click. Sure. Real super easy and stuff. You must have been writing some of this over the pandemic, I would imagine. How was that for you? I was, and it was decent, though I, over the pandemic, I had several friends who had been laid off at the time, though I, for whatever reason, the job that I was in right then, I was there full time, so nothing really changed too much for me, apart from the fact that there wasn't much to do afterwards at work. There wasn't a lot of socializing, so it was tough, but I think it really helped vent a lot of the uncertainty that was going on at the time. So
yeah. It's interesting times. Do you think any of the weird events going on around, or the stress and the fights and the trucker campaign up there and all that, do you think any of that sort of seeps into your writing? Do you think it makes it a little darker at times?
I don't know about darker. I would hope. I hope this, actually. I hope it makes things more intense. And I think that's probably important for a young person in the same things too, because I think young people feel things a little bit more intensely than us seasoned veterans do, who have a little bit more emotional regulation and a little bit more life experience. So I would hope that maybe that intensity that might be in there could just help it relate more. Ideally, who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Something you'll see later when you get older and look back when you're Lita Ford's age.
Yeah, right.
Well, anyway, we've had a good conversation. Now, of course, your latest book, or your new book, your first book, book 1 of Fires of Innovation, and it's Hunted by Fire. And our guest has been the author of this book, Jim Hepburn. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to meet you.
Thanks, Jim.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.